At any given moment, around 2,000 ships are passing through this stretch of water. Roughly a quarter of everything traded by sea on Earth, the food in your supermarket, the fuel in your car, the device in your hand, pass through here on its way to you. It's 600 miles long. At its narrowest point, it's about 1.5 miles wide. And if it closed for 30 days, the global economy would lose more money than the entire Suez Canal blockage in 2021, every single week. I'm the host of Supply Chain Daily, and I spend my time inside the global supply chain, dealing with the kinds of routes, risks, and bottlenecks that move the world's goods around. On this channel, I take the supply chain stories that quietly run the global economy and explain them properly from someone who's been on the inside. Without further ado, let's get straight to it. The Strait of Malacca runs between the Malay Peninsula on one side and the Indonesian island of Sumatra on the other. It connects the Indian Ocean to the South China Sea. Every container ship coming from Europe, the Middle East, Africa, or India and going to East Asia uses it. Every ship coming the other way uses it too. Roughly 100,000 ships transit the strait every year. They carry around a quarter of all global maritime trade by value. About 80% of China's oil imports, including almost all the oil it gets from the Middle East, comes through this waterway. Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan are similarly dependent. If you wanted to choose a single point on a map where you could choke off the economic lifeblood of half the planet, this would be the spot. And that's exactly why everyone is so quietly nervous about it. The Strait of Malacca has been a major trade route for over 2,000 years. Arab, Indian, Chinese, Malay, and later European traders all used it because geography gave them no real alternative. The next viable route through that part of the world is the Lombok Strait, which adds roughly 1,600 kilometers and 3 to 5 days to a typical voyage. In the modern era, two things turned the strait from important to indispensable. First, the rise of East Asia as the world's manufacturing hub. By the early 2000s, China had become the factory of the world, and most of what it sold and most of what it imported needed to pass through here. Second, containerization. The standardized shipping container made enormous economies of scale possible. And the biggest container ships built today need deep, well-charted routes with well-functioning ports. Malacca delivers both, with Singapore sitting at the eastern end as the world's most efficient transshipment hub. The result is that almost no other route can compete on cost. Ships go through Malacca because Malacca is where the money is. Here's what most coverage misses about the strait. It is genuinely vulnerable in 3 different ways, and the supply chain industry has been quietly preparing for each. First, physical congestion. The strait was not designed for the size and volume of modern shipping. At certain points, the deep water channel is barely more than 2 miles wide. Ships pass within a few hundred meters of each other in opposite directions. Major collisions happen here every few years. A single grounding or sinking in the wrong place could close one direction of traffic for weeks. Second, piracy and armed robbery. The strait sits next to one of the world's active piracy zones. Insurers track incidents in the broader Singapore Strait region carefully, and while modern naval cooperation between Singapore, Malaysia, and Indonesia has reduced large-scale attacks, smaller incidents, boarding, theft, kidnapping of crew still happen regularly. Nothing existential, but enough to matter to insurance pricing. Third, and most consequential, geopolitical chokepoint risk. In any serious confrontation between China and the United States, the Strait of Malacca is the obvious lever. The US Navy has the capability to close the strait to Chinese shipping. China knows this. Chinese strategists have for years openly called this the Malacca Dilemma, the recognition that a single naval action could cut off most of China's oil supply. This is not a hypothetical. It is one of the central reasons China has spent the last decade building strategic alternatives, pipelines through Myanmar, ports in Pakistan and Sri Lanka, and overland routes through Central Asia. Every one of those projects exists because of this strait. Inside the supply chain industry, the Strait of Malacca is treated less like a route and more like a critical single point of failure. Insurance markets price choke point risk into shipping rates every single day. Major shipping companies model what-if Malacca closes scenarios in their long-term planning. National strategic reserves, particularly oil reserves in Japan, South Korea, and increasingly China, exist in part to absorb a Malacca disruption. The contingency plan most carriers have on file is to detour around Indonesia either via the Lombok or Sunda Straits. That sounds simple. It isn't. Those alternative straits have shallower water, less infrastructure, and weren't designed for the volume of traffic Malacca handles. A serious diversion of even a fraction of Malacca's traffic would create new bottlenecks within days. And here's the part most coverage really misses. Even a perceived risk to the strait, a credible threat, a single high-profile incident escalating regional tension, pushes up marine insurance war risk premiums for the entire region. Higher premiums get passed to shippers. Shippers pass them to importers. And eventually it shows up in the price of almost everything you buy. The strait doesn't have to actually close to cost the global economy real money. It just has to look like it might. Here's what most coverage of the strait misses entirely. The Strait of Malacca is not just a trade route. It is the single biggest hidden vulnerability in the global economy. And the world has spent the last 70 years quietly building itself around the assumption that this narrow stretch of water will always be open. It probably will. Most likely it will keep functioning the way it always has. Ships passing through unremarkable, cargo arriving where it's supposed to. But it doesn't take a war to break it. It takes one large grounding in the wrong place. One credible threat at the wrong moment. One serious incident that makes insurers blink. And suddenly thousands of ships are rerouting. Billions in costs land in the global supply chain within weeks, and prices everywhere start to move. The supply chain industry has known this for years. We model it. We price it. We carry contingency plans for it. Most of the rest of the world doesn't think about it all. Until the day they do, and by then, it's too late to do anything but pay. That gap between what the industry knows and what everyone else assumes is what I'm trying to close on this channel. This is the kind of story I'm covering on this channel. The systems and choke points that quietly run global trade explained from inside the industry. If that's useful to you, consider subscribing. There's a new every Thursday and Saturday. And drop your thoughts in the comments. If you've worked in shipping, in defense, in maritime law, your perspective makes this channel better, and I read everything. Until next time, keep an eye on what's moving.